good afternoon, or good morning, or good evening, depending on where are you based today. Welcome to this webinar. I'm very glad to talk on behalf of the Ocean Governance Project, but as well as our colleagues of the French Biodiversity Agency and MEDPAN that are supporting the organization of this event. So I'm going to share my screen so you can follow the presentation, and I'm going to explain a little bit what will be the contents. Hope you are seeing it properly. So this is the agenda for today. As you know, the event is expected to last for 1.5 hours. It's not very long, but we prefer to be a little bit brief, but concentrating the information on the topics that are maybe of your interest. So we will do a first introductory remarks about the Ocean Governance Project, so you can understand what is the context in which we are organizing this event, but there will be also some additional remarks from MEDPAN and from the French Biodiversity Agency as co-organizers. And then we will have two presentations, or two groups of presentations. The first is about the progress on the global and standardized criteria for important marine turtle area. This will be done by Susan Garland from MEDPAN and Brian Wallace from the IUCN Marine Turtle Specialist Group. And the second presentation will be from Dimitri Medetian and Fenia Maras from the French Biodiversity Agency, and is about the results of the study that Dimitri did in a recent internship at the agency about marine turtle protection under the different regional seas convention. And then hopefully we will have still a few minutes for questions and answers. So I will do the first introduction just to contextualize what is the Ocean Governance Project and why we are working on marine turtles. And then I will give the floor to my two colleagues, Susan and Fenia, to complement this introductory part of our webinar. So the Ocean Governance is an European Union project from the Foreign Policy Instrument, and the aim is protecting and restoring marine ecosystems, catalysts for building peace and security, and fostering sustainable economies in Southeast Asia and the Atlantic Ocean basin. So the main objective is to increase the European Union role as a global actor in international ocean governance by fostering this regional and international cooperation that has to be relevant for the protection and restoration of marine and coastal ecosystems. It has two main geographic areas, the Atlantic and the Southeast Asia. And initially, I'm saying initially because we have a big delay because the COVID restrictions, and we are just now thinking on whether we can compensate this, but initially it was expected to last for 3 years, so that this will be the beginning of the second year. Sorry. So the project have 4 components, and the component that is the more relevant for today's activity is the second one. The first one is about restoring marine and coastal ecosystems in Southeast Asia, and the second is about supporting and improving the marine protected areas management in the Atlantic. Is about based on a concept of shared environmental protection. And as I'm going to tell you later, there is the continuity of a previous transatlantic MPA project. Then there is a third component that consists on sharing experiences between the Atlantic and Southeast Asia, and a fourth component improving the dialogue, the basis for a dialogue between different marine and coast stakeholders in Southeast Asia region. So it's more about transboundary cooperation targeting the Southeast Asia region. As I said, the main component for the activity today is the component 2 in the Atlantic, and as I explained, this is the continuity of a previous European Union project that was called Transatlantic MPA project that have had in the past, and it continues to have, 3 different partnership or twinning projects. Those twinning projects are targeting MPA networks of managers in the Atlantic, and another one is targeting coastal resilience and how to cope with the rapid changes we are suffering today. And the third one is dealing with marine mammals protection in a way to really include this marine mammals protection in the management plan and in the management activity of MPAs. So these are here you can see the first partners of these 3 different twinnings in the previous phase. So in orange, they are the partners of the MPA networks twinning, which is the main organizer of this event today. And in green, the marine mammals, and in blue, the resilience twinning. This is the list of the current partners in our twinning. So the all partners that were already involved in the previous transatlantic project are 3 regional MPA networks: CAMPAM in the Caribbean, MEDPAN in the Mediterranean, NAMPAM in North America, and RAMPAO in West Africa, plus 2 national agencies, the French Biodiversity Agency and the Fundación Biodiversidad in Spain. With the new Ocean Governance project, we enlarged the number of partners, and today we are very glad to have working with us other regional partners such as OSPAR or HELCOM or Red Parques and the Patagonian Forum. These are regional partners, and as national partners, we have the NOAA in North America, in the US, the CONAM in Mexico, Parks of Colombia, Dominican Republic, Uruguay, and Senegal. So the main objective of this twinning was to establish effective partnerships, strengthening the networks, and establish a common strategy to share information, knowledge, and tools, build networking capacity, and to also do some policy support and advocacy activity, and improving the financing of MPA networks. So during the first phases, the first 2 elements were not developed. So we are now working at this level of developing this sharing of information, knowledge, and tools, and improving the building of capacity. And the target areas for us are, some of them are structural, just supporting the work of the networks and helping them to be more effective on their roles as policy support or on fundraising, while others are technical. So this is related to the different axes that I mentioned previously, that the first 2 were not developed, those technical ones, and the other more structural were the ones in which we begin to work in the past. And today in this technical level, we have identified different thematics of common interest between these networks and national agencies. So I will just go directly to the point of marine turtles. One of those thematics is the role of the MPA networks of managers, either national or regional, in addressing marine turtles and their habitats conservation and management within MPAs. So this is one of the topics we identify that will be really relevant for all of us to work with. So and in the context of the overall Atlantic component, the MPA networks will also act as a technical level by providing support and transferring good practices on other topics, for instance, restoration marine mammals that are developing in the other twinnings that I mentioned, or resilience, or also financing. And this will be a way to really connect the different twinnings, the different partnerships in what we call the intertwinning activity. So in this sense, what we want to work in terms of the marine turtles is not limited to our composition in our twinning, but also the partners and institutions that are contributing to the other 2 twinnings, the twinning on resilience. As you can imagine, coastal resilience is really also relevant for marine turtle protection. And the twinning of marine mammals, despite we are talking about different species, they have in common that are really big migratory groups of species. So this can really help in the understanding on how different MPAs at different areas of the Atlantic can exchange and can really improve their capacity for managing and protecting all those different species, either marine mammals or marine turtles. So the work we are developing as networks is also connected with the intertwining activity with our colleagues working on resilience and marine mammals, as well as interregionally with other partners in Southeast Asia. So we are mainly targeting the Atlantic, but then when we discuss about marine turtle protection, the big majority of the challenges, as well as the opportunities and methodologies and the tools we have, might be applied everywhere in the world. So this is also a good topic for exchanging with Southeast Asia. And just to finalize this introduction on how we address this, so in the context of the project, we are mapping actors and gathering information, because one of the things we want to avoid is duplicate efforts. So the first issue is to identify what is already existing, and then we will develop an analysis and feasibility evaluation to really identify what will be the most appropriate actions that we could promote from the ocean governance project to really be useful in terms of supporting the managers in the protection of this group of species. So this will include the development of an action plan, including exchanges and capacity building activities, also exchanges with Southeast Asia and different workshops. So this seminar today is the first ever we organized, even if we didn't finish this mapping and the analysis, but considering that two of our partners, the French Biodiversity Agency and MedPan, have developed an interesting work from different perspectives, but targeting marine turtles, we thought altogether that it will be very interesting to really share the progress that they are doing today. So I will decide to organize this webinar to present not only to the partners of the ocean governance, but all the community of people dealing with protection of marine turtles, the information that we have on that, and also to hear at you if you have suggestions, ideas, and things that can be useful to finalize the development of certain tools. So this webinar is organized in three editions. Today is the first one in English. There will be another one tomorrow in French, and a third one by the end of the week in Spanish. And I stop here and I give the floor to my colleague Susan to present a little bit the approach from MedPan to be involved in this initiative today. Susan?
Good afternoon, Puri, and thank you, and good afternoon, morning to you all. So I'm Suzanne Garland, the Scientific Officer for MedPan, and MedPan is the network of managers of marine protected area in the Mediterranean. So Puri already explained that it's the second phase of this ocean governance project, and MedPan was lucky to be part of the first phase with a key focus on MPA twinnings. And now for the second phase, there's also, as she explained, a focus on marine turtle. And marine turtle have been a key topic for MPA manager in the Mediterranean for quite a few years now. MedPan created a marine turtle working group in 2017. And MedPan is also part of a MAVA project for the conservation of marine turtle with many of the Mediterranean partners. Some of them are here today. That also started in 2017 and is also in the second phase just now. And I won't be too long because you will get more of this detail in the presentation that will follow. So I don't want to to repeat myself, but yeah, marine turtle and mobile species in general are a key topic for MPA managers because they are challenging, they move around, and they need that integrated approach and also that shared experience approach to learn from each other and put in place complemented measure across the Mediterranean to address their conservation needs across their habitat, their key habitat. So thank you again, and thank you all. And yeah, I will tell shortly more about it in detail, and with also my co-presenter Brian Wallace from the IUCN Marine Turtle Specialist Group, and we'll be happy to answer any question after that. Thank you.
Thank you, Fenia. And now I see, thank you, Susan. And now I see Fenia moving in my screen, but you have the floor, Fenia.
Can you unmute yourself, Fenia? You're trying, it's not working, okay. Of course, if we don't have any kind of
Yeah, I think I have it. I'm sorry, it's a new platform for me, and I was looking for the good option for my micro, so I hope I can stop it on time at the end of my presentation. So thank you everybody for your interest, and I think we have a great attendance today, so that's really, really great. I'm Fenia Mara. I'm not the director of the French Biodiversity Agency, of course. I'm working in the direction for international relations of the French Biodiversity Agency. And I would like to thank Puri and the whole EU Ocean Governance project team, for the organization of the series of 3 webinars, and also for gathering together different networks, different initiatives on marine turtles, and also for gathering with for sharing all this information and updates with the regional networks of marine protected areas managers and the Marine Protected Areas Agency Partnership, whose members are connected today, and for the series of the whole 3 sessions. So the French Biodiversity Agency was created by law in 2020 in the aim to protect biodiversity in land and at sea. It's a public institution under the dual auspices of the French Ministries for Ecology and for Agriculture and Food. The French Biodiversity Agency supports regional cooperation and international strategic initiatives. So it's with great pleasure and interest that we share today the works that Dimitri Medetian made during his training related to the regional sea conventions and their framework to protect marine turtles. So this week he's back to course, to classroom, so he cannot be with us today. He had registered his presentation, and I hope I will be able to answer the questions you may have, even if we may not be as detailed as he will do it. But it was really a great. He really made a great work on this. Also to say that France is also hosting 6 of the 7 marine turtle species, and these are different stages of their life cycle in its national waters. And France has 23.5% of its territorial waters protected. And this MPA network includes also the French overseas territories that represent the great richness of marine biodiversity. Thus, the French Biodiversity Agency contributes into strengthening the partnership to develop important marine turtle areas also in the regional seas. So we hope that these initiatives will be useful for your protected areas too. And we invite you to share with us during the ending session of question and answers any examples or feedback experience from regional cooperation that has been useful for you and for marine turtles management issues, please. So enjoy this session.
Thanks a lot. Thank you. So let's go with the content. And I invite now Susan and Brian to present about this progress on the identification of criteria for important marine turtle areas.
So tell me if you can see my screen. Yes?
Yes, we see.
Lovely. So I'm just getting used to this platform, trying to make myself small and so I can see the screen too. I think it's okay. So yeah, today I'm going to talk for the first part towards important marine turtle area, and then I will give the floor to Brian, who will go more into detail about those important marine turtle area, what they may be and may become, and the process to get there. So just a quick word on MedPan, as I say, which is the network of marine protected area managers that is dedicated to the halt of loss of biodiversity in the Mediterranean Sea. And the core mission of MedPan is to actively contribute to achieve a representative, connected, integrated, and fully effectively managed system of Mediterranean MPA through a strong and active networking of MPA managers. It's really based on a human network, but also all the actors that work at all levels to increase the knowledge and the capacity of those MPAs. So to date, MedPan gathers around 131 organizations across 21 countries in the Mediterranean and represent more than 110 MPA that are managed. So today, towards important marine turtle area is part of a conservation project to protect marine turtle in the Mediterranean region. And this is a project that has been financed by the MAVA since 2017. And we are now in the second phase of this project that will finish in 2022. The SPARAC, which is the Regional Coordination Center for Specially Protected Area of the Barcelona Convention, is the coordinating partner for this project. And then MedPan is one of the technical partners with many others across the Med working in that project. So the overall objective of this project is to contribute to an effective and sustainable protection of the Mediterranean marine turtle and the habitat. So mainly the loggerhead turtle and the green turtle. There's several strategic axes to achieve that overall objective. And the one that the IMTA, Important Marine Turtle Area, is part of is mainly strategy 2. I won't go into the detail of that. And more broadly, I wanted to just explain to you how we came to those IMTA in that project. Why do we need it to identify this important marine turtle area? And this is because to put in place appropriate and effective conservation measure for highly mobile species such as marine turtle, we need a few ingredients, 3 ingredients, which is some knowledge about the distribution and abundance of this population. Also to know the key activities of their life cycles, where do they breed, where do they feed, which are the route they take to move from one place to the other, to identify the pressure that affects those populations. And then once we know that, we can identify and mobilize existing means to implement conservation measures. So, yeah, as I say, part of it is knowledge, and then the other part is identifying and implementing the right tools. And so to identify these tools, we need to identify, which area needs most protection. So in the past years, there's been the identification of important area for highly mobile species, especially for, there's been the one identified for important bird area, the one we called EBAS, and the one that has been identified for marine mammals, EMAS. And those are done through international process that is also standardized. And this exercise has been done on the Mediterranean. So now for the Mediterranean, we've got that, a good map that shows, which are the important area for these mobile species. And this information, this layer of information, can then be used in the designation of area that deserve particular attention in terms of conservation. so to become MPAs, but not only, it can also help identify other effective conservation measure that would be effective to protect those species, such as PSSI, reduced speeds of vessel or fishery restricted area. And they also help, all the actors of the conservation for marine turtle to design strategy for those species. And here I just wanted to share with you the fact that part of the EU new biodiversity strategy for 2030, one of the key targets is to legally protect at least 30% of EU sea. And that means, identifying maybe a new area to be protected in the EU. And in the criteria for the identification of this new protected area that needs to be designed under this EU biodiversity strategy, they have identified, for example, key biodiversity area or EMAs, just as I presented earlier, this important marine mammal area. So these kind of standardized international process to identify this important area are key to really after feed over process that will improve the conservation of the species. And what about marine turtle? So for now, in the Mediterranean, we have a map of Mediterranean marine protected area. And we also have identified for those marine protected area, the one that justified the designation of the site because of the marine turtle, and the one that has specific conservation measure for marine turtle. But what we would like to see added to this map is the important marine turtle area, to have an overview of are we doing the right thing in the right place, what needs to be done next, and overall improve our strategy to protect marine turtle in the Mediterranean, not only in MPAs, but beyond MPAs. And so through the MAVA project, so we had that status, or we saw that we needed those IMTA to move on with our strategy to be more effective. And some of the key recommendations from the MAVA partner project was that IMTA criteria should be ideally based on science, that ideally, like for important marine mammal area and important bird area, they should be standardized and international in order to be replicable, and also facilitate the adoption by international convention and other organizations. And also that the IMTA criteria need to be a transparent and open process. And so once we got there, we realized that, MAVA partner, needed the help of experts to achieve that target. And this is how we reach out to the IUCN Marine Turtle Specialist Group to see if they had already started or planning or thinking of developing this IMTA, and to merge with them or support their initiative if they were planning to do it, to get those IMTA criteria developed, and then to be able to run them through the Mediterranean. So this is where I give the floor to Brian, so he will tell us, where they are within that ongoing work. Check.
Thank you, Susan. Can everyone hear me okay? Right.
Yes, great.
Okay. Bonjour, buen dia, good day, good afternoon. And we're all spanning multiple time zones here. I am running this WebEx through the browser, and I see now, unfortunately, it won't allow me to share. So I'm wondering if I might be able to share the link to the presentation. Maybe Susan, could I send it to you? And if it wouldn't be a problem for you to advance through the slides for me, just to not have us delay further. Just give me 1 second.
Ryan, is it the same
Yep.
presentation that you did last time? If it is, I've got the slides on hand.
That's fine. I made a couple of modifications, but we can use that. Sure. Yep.
Yeah?
Yep, that's
Okay.
fine. Yep. Sorry about the delay, folks. Like Barbara, this is a new platform for me as well, and thought I could run it right through the browser, but apparently it's not going to allow a share.
So maybe I need the authorization to share.
You have it, Susan? Or you don't? Normally, yes.
Yeah, it looks like it doesn't want to share anymore.
Maybe because I was trying to take the controls
Ah,
here.
yes. Okay.
Yeah? Okay.
So what do you see? Do you see the IMTA slides or not?
Not yet.
You see my email.
Yes, we do see your
Why?
email. Luckily, we are more or less a bit used to these kind of things.
Sorry, yes.
No, it's
Start
okay.
again and try and
Susan, I think there is an option to share my web browser if you are going to show from Google Drive.
yeah, no, it worked perfectly when it was just before I could choose the screen, and for some reason it's this one is yes, is that the right one? Yeah.
Indeed. Yep.
Good.
And we can start right here, Susan, as we had discussed before. That's fine.
Great, and just tell me when you want me to swap.
Sure, will do. Thank you for that. Apologies for the technical glitch there, everyone. Thanks for your patience. We have quite a bit that we could discuss, but we'll try to move through relatively quickly to give folks a general overview of where we are to date. And just very briefly, for those who aren't familiar, the Marine Turtle Specialist Group is a specialist group of the Species Survival Commission of the IUCN. We have over 200 members around the world, from countries around the world. Of course, turtles, like birds and mammals, are distributed globally. And so our membership is meant to reflect that geographic diversity. And so the development of the IMTAs, or the Important Marine Turtle Areas, is the latest in a long line of global conservation prioritization tools and products that we've tried to develop within the MTSG, and an exciting new addition that is. So to date, and I want to thank again Fenia and Susan for the great introductions to what I'll present here on behalf of a big team, actually, on the MTSG side, who are helping to coordinate. And I want to recognize that one of our Marine Turtle Specialist Group co-chairs is on the call, Roderick Mast. And there are also several folks involved in this process who are here. And then also just a quick hello to all my fellow turtle expert friends who are on the call. I see a lot of familiar names, which is a lot of fun. Right, so to date, we've gone through multiple rounds of gathering feedback on preliminary concept notes. We've also developed a couple of surveys to try to get as another tool to gather feedback from our MTSG membership. Susan, would you mind just going back to the thing? No, it's okay. No problem. As a starting point, and Susan's introduction was really great for this because I don't need to go into detail on a lot of the background because she already did. But as a starting point, we wanted to provide the Marine Turtle Specialist Group membership with some of the context of important area designation frameworks that already exist for other widely distributed marine megafauna taxa, like seabirds and marine mammals. And so we sort of seeded the process, if you will, with an introduction to the IBA and the IMMA criteria. Developed a concept note, circulated that in a survey for feedback, incorporated that feedback in another edition of another document and another survey to collect information on draft criteria and potential processes. And then, and at the moment, we're currently sifting through a lot of really great and detailed feedback that we got, both on the document as well as via the survey. I have to check with Rod and Paolo Casali, the other co-chair, the Marine Turtle Specialist Group, but I reckon that the responses to the survey might have been some of the highest response rates we've gotten on most things. Okay, Susan, you can advance. Thanks. So these tables are not meant for us to go through now, but rather to give you a sense of what we've shared with people. The next two, this slide and the next, will show you the sample criteria that we synthesized after the first round of review and then put back out to the membership just now. We wanted to note that how, for one, if it was a criterion that came from an existing framework, how we might think of modifying it in the marine turtle context. We also tried to identify the kinds of data that would be needed. And then the notes column, it's always useful, as we all know, to try to capture some other details that are important to be considering. In other words, we started to try to seed the discussion about how these criteria might actually be evaluated. The process component of this work is what we're going to be working on now in the last phase of developing the draft framework. So vulnerable species and populations is something that exists in other frameworks. We retained it for folks to react to. And then aggregations, congregations, key life cycle activities. If you're familiar with the IBA or the IMMA frameworks or both, you'll see some homology here. You'll see some familiar terms. And this is what we're currently looking at with our members. Okay, you can advance, Susan. Thanks. And then also information about range restrictedness, distinctiveness, diversity. And then we, upon the first round of comments and discussions internally, also especially reviewing an existing important site network framework that the Indian Ocean Southeast Asia Memorandum of Understanding for Sea Turtles developed, the IOC. There's a cultural significance criterion that we've added now for folks to respond to. And we got a lot of really great feedback. Again, haven't had a chance to dive into it deeply just yet, but we want to reflect, as Susan mentioned, we want to reflect not only, center the IMTA development process on biocentric criteria and not bringing in politics and those kinds of considerations. But we recognize that cultural significance is something that can be defined in lots of different ways, but also lots of very important ways. And we, in reflecting the values of our membership and of sea turtle conservation globally, we wanted to make sure that we have this cultural significance counterpart. So we're in the process of defining that with the help of membership, but anticipate that it will be part of the final framework. Okay, next slide, please. And just briefly, again, I'm sorry about not being able to update these or be able to share the updated slides. But interestingly, the results, these are preliminary results from the survey that we just closed. We now have 39 responses, but interestingly, the results on these next two slides look quite similar, even with a significant addition of responses. So what we wanted to ask on these slides, I'll show you here for a second. One, we wanted to know whether folks would like to see all of those criteria be met for an IMTA to be assigned, or whether only a single criteria, or perhaps that there's a relative level of importance within the suite of criteria. And what we're seeing is that folks don't want all of the criteria to have to be met, but rather some aspect of flexibility and recognition that there are some criteria that should be perhaps evaluated to be more important than others. Even though the others might still be part of the evaluation process, there might be an emphasis on certain criteria. Next slide, please. And then extending from that, and another way to sort of get at this question, whether they should be applied or weighted equally. And as you can see here, again, folks think that some criteria are more important than others, and this should be reflected in how we evaluate the criteria overall. And as you can see, we've got a diverse set of responses, and so we're part of the challenge, but it's a good challenge for us, is to go through those responses and try to figure out how best we can incorporate all of them in some way, so that we're reflecting the broad and diverse perspectives of our membership. Next slide, please. All right, so what's next? As I mentioned, we're in the process now of going through the responses that we got. The survey and the document were just closed. The comment period was just closed. Of course, then figure out how to incorporate that additional feedback into refining, tightening up even more the suite of criteria and how they might be organized. But then also think about how the actual IMTA determination process might look, because that's the other component of what we're developing in this particular phase of work. And so we need to define the relative importance of different criteria, as well as how they might fit together as a puzzle, if you will. And then we're looking at hopefully finalizing this draft framework in the next couple of months, probably. And I think that's pretty reasonable, even though we've got a lot to go through, and we want to have another comment period on sort of the semi-final or the draft framework as it comes together before we finalize. Next slide, please. And before I wrap up, I want to emphasize that the goals Susan laid out really nicely as kind of foundational goals for what IMTAs hopefully should accomplish, so that they complement other important area frameworks, as well as become a tool for MPA managers and other conservation workers. The goals have been enriched and defined even more to a greater extent through this comment period. And so as we're thinking about how the framework might look and how it might be implemented in the future, we're starting to, the goals are coming into a better focus, I think, from the Marine Turtle Specialist Group perspective. So we want to, as Susan mentioned, we certainly want to uphold the idea of the framework being globally applicable to ensure consistency among regions and across species once IMTAs are defined. However, we want to balance that global consistency with regional diversity. It's diversity not just in sea turtle populations and threats and biology and life cycle traits, et cetera, but also in our membership and in a lot of ways in the conservation challenges and values that different regions have. And so we want this framework to be globally consistent, but also allow for a flexible approach in how those criteria could be evaluated. In that vein, we're really looking at, we want the IMTAs to reflect a diverse conservation status of sea turtle populations, not just the ones that maybe are facing the gravest future or the most critically endangered. And then, of course, incorporating biocentric criteria or kind of your standard Western style knowledge and data, but also other diverse sources of knowledge, and then, of course, that cultural significance component. Next slide, please. And then, so extending from those goals, the potential processes, we want to be clear that while as a global Marine Turtle Specialist Group, we're trying to develop this globally applicable yet flexible framework, we recognize that we don't want this to be a top-down kind of thing, that the MTSG defines these criteria and then says everybody needs to do it in a certain way. but rather we see our role at the kind of the global level as facilitating the development of the framework, and then providing the connections with folks such as yourselves and these kinds of international instruments, so that when IMTAs are defined at different regions and different regional levels, that we can help make the connections between, you know, our members who might be working at a national scale or a subnational scale to these international opportunities. We want to work through the MTSG membership. We have some existing structures and processes in place to how we develop regional products and global products, and so we're sort of piggybacking, if you will, or taking advantage of those processes in developing IMTAs, so that we're not creating something totally different, but rather you know, building on momentum in those respects. And then a really important component here is that the determination process, we want to be the actual definition of IMTAs. We want to be decentralized. Again, we don't want the MTSG global leadership to be dictating how every region needs to do things, but rather facilitating, here's the frameworks, here are the potential opportunities for these IMTAs to feed in, but what's important, we want regional experts to be empowered to identify those things, to make sure that they're working for our regional colleagues. As we've talked about with Susan and Fenya and other colleagues so far, the idea would be then to, once we have this draft framework in place, to test drive it, to try with a couple of regions to help iteratively improve the framework and apply it to other regions. And so we've talked, of course, about the Mediterranean. We've talked about the North Atlantic on our last discussions. We're looking at potentially the wider Caribbean as a really obviously extremely diverse and challenging, again in a good way, kind of region with lots of opportunities to see just how flexible the framework could be in determining IMTAs that make sense at a broader regional scale. Next slide, please. And that's it. Again, apologies, folks. My fault for not having the ability to share the most updated slides. Thank you, Susan, for being ready to step in and help. And again, thanks to the folks who are on the call for all your help so far in helping to develop these. Come as far as we have. I see a lot of folks in the participants list who have been involved, and again, want to recognize your great help now and going forward. So we look forward to working with all of you, and yeah, thanks for the discussion, the opportunity to share.
Thanks to you, Brian and Susan. I think it was very interesting to be updated about the progress of your work, but that we are all expecting to be finished. So, and we're opening for questions, because usually I think it's that we heard also the results of the research that Dimitri has done, because it can complement quite well what you were talking about, this regional approach, this dimension that can be adapted to different contexts. So let's see what Dimitri found in this research about what the regional seas convention are doing today regarding marine turtle protection. And after this presentation, we can open the floor for discussions. I'm going to share the video. Hopefully it will work. Let's see.
Puri, I can do it. Do not worry, I have it ready.
No, it works well. If you have problems, just tell me, because I see my screen.
Good.
But
Hello, I am Dimitri Medichan, engineering student at AgroParisTech in environmental management. I'm going to present you my work on marine turtles in regional sea conventions during my internship at the French Biodiversity Agency in Brest between September 2020 and February 2021. This is the regional sea convention that I studied during my internship. All of these conventions were signed by France, except the Abidjan Convention. First, the Cartagena Convention with the Regional Activity Center for the Specially Protected Areas and Wildlife. In the wider Caribbean. I studied also the OSPAR Convention for the Northeast Atlantic, the Barcelona Convention for the Mediterranean Sea, The Abidjan MOU under the auspices of the CMS, the IOC Marine Turtles MOU for the Nairobi Convention and the CMS, and the IMTA and Nouméa Convention coordinated by the Secretariat of the Pacific Regional Environmental Program. First, for the Cartagena Convention, there is the implementation of the SPO protocol with every species on the Annex 2 that allows strict protection. The species working group of the RACSPO works on the marine turtle conservation with the Marine Protected Areas group. The main stakeholder for the conservation in this region is the Wildcast Network. And also in theory, each party has to implement a national action plan, but this is not always the case. Marine turtle status is less concerning than the IUCN expects, but the pandemic has a negative impact on the populations with the illegal trade. And there is also a strong failure to respect the regulation in the Caribbean. For the OSPAR Convention, there is an OSPAR list of threatened species. The leatherback is listed in every leatherback turtle is listed in every region, and the loggerhead turtle is listed in the 4 and 5 regions. In 2009, there are publication on the management recommendation has been published, and an assessment of in 2021, France coordinates the assessment of the marine turtle status, and France leads also with Spain at the 26th collective action on the implementation of measures to reduce anthropogenic threats like bycatch and pollution. There are also a reduction of an overview of existing action in the parties, and the creation of the Sea Turtle Expert Group will be effective under the 26th collective action. In the Barcelona Convention, the Regional Activity Center for the Specially Protected Areas implements an action plan on the conservation of marine turtles in the Mediterranean Sea within the framework of the Biological Diversity Protocol. There is also a publication of guidelines and recommendations, and the RACSPA adopts an ecosystemic approach. There is a high number of trained people in the field, and many studies on fisheries interactions. The Mediterranean countries are well involved in the marine turtles conservation, but there is a need of an ongoing development of care centers for marine turtles. The Abidjan Memorandum of the CMS has come into force in 1999 and counts 23 signatory countries for the safeguard of 6 species of marine turtles. In West Africa, there are several networks for the marine turtles conservation, and at the beginning, there was a nice dynamic from the MOU, and field projects on the field were implemented in the beginning of the 20th century. An action plan was developed in 2002 and was updated in 2008, but the MOU does not operate from many years because of a very high lack of funding. For the Nairobi Convention, the Indian Ocean Southeast Asia Marine Turtles MOU has come into force in 2001 and has been signed by 33 parties. The objective is to facilitate the exchanges between the different stakeholders. There are two working groups, one for the western part of the Indian Ocean and the other for the eastern part. And these working groups define the management priorities. The main issue is the protection of nesting beaches and sea turtle habitats, and the creation of knowledge exchange networks is in progress. There was also a work with the Tuna Commission in the Indian Ocean to prevent bycatch. The IMTA and Numea Convention. For this convention, a regional program for the Pacific marine species between 2013 and 2017 has been implemented by the Secretariat of the Pacific Regional Environment Program. It also includes the marine turtles part in this program. For the different objectives of this program, each country establishes its own actions. The creation of a sea turtle database is also in progress. The assessment of the action plan is underway, but the action plan has not been repeated. There is a very large late of the assessment of this action plan. Work on the bycatch has been conducted with the Central Pacific Issues Commission for the tuna in this convention. I'm going to present the strengths and the areas of improvement of the different conventions. For the Cartagena conventions, the parties pay more and more attention on the conservation of marine turtles, but the negative aspect is that there is a strong failure to also respect the regulation and not enough financial and human means for marine turtles at the Regional Activity Center. For the OSPAR Convention, collective actions gathering parties and structuring actions are implemented, but no obligations for the parties. There are no obligations for the parties to follow the recommendations, and also a slowness in the process of decision making. In the south, for the Barcelona Convention, there is a high number of trained people on the field and a good involvement of the countries, but a lack of care centers and stranding networks. Also, administrative procedures can slow down the work on the field. For the Abidjan Memorandum of Understanding, there was a nice dynamic at the beginning with the signature of many states, about 23 states, and the production of an action plan and field project. But the MOU is off from many years due to the lack of financial means. For the Indian Ocean Southeast Asia Memorandum of Understanding, there is a good preservation of nesting beaches and positive relationships with the fisheries sector. But in the counterpart, the knowledge exchange network can be improved, and there is a need of more financial means. For the IMTA and Numea Convention, an action work of on the bycatch issue conducted, specifically on the turtle extruder devices implementation. But there is a lack of knowledge on marine turtles and a need to improve studies practices. Also, the reinforcement of laws application is needed. For the other international conventions and European conventions, the protection of the World Heritage has no particular measures for marine turtles, but 46 classified areas have major issues for the turtles. For the CITES, the whole species are protected under the Annex 1 that prohibits international trade. The Convention on Biological Diversity protects all levels of biological diversity, so it includes the turtles, but there is not a specific objective. The lizardback turtle, the loggerhead turtle, the green turtle, and the Camp Riley turtle are listed under the Annex 2 of the Berne Convention, the European Convention, and an expert group on the conservation of amphibians and reptiles has been created under this convention. And there is a special attention to the conservation of marine turtles in the Berne Convention. For the Natura 2000 Convention, the loggerhead and the green turtle are listed under the Annexes 2 and 4 for special areas of conservation, and the Camp Riley turtle and the hawksbill turtles and the leatherback turtle are listed under the Annex 4. There are no particular measures except the protection, and it does not apply for overseas territories. In the Marine Strategy Framework Directive, there is no specific classification, but an assessment of the good environmental status of marine turtles has been made. The Indesit 1 and 2 projects study the impact of marine litter on the turtles. And there is an improvement of the protection of turtles and habitats under this directive. Lastly, I'm going to speak about the Ramsar sites and the link with marine turtles. The resolution 1324 proposed by France and Senegal on the reinforcement of the conservation of marine turtles' coastal habitats and the designation as Ramsar sites of major issues areas for marine turtles has been adopted during the 13th Conference of Parties of the Ramsar Convention in Dubai in October 2018. This is the map of the existing Ramsar sites in Southeast Asia, and the authors of the report Ramsar Sites and Marine Turtles, Jacques Frété and Patrick Triplé, proposed to designate the following possible Ramsar sites. In Japan, the Ishigaki Island in the archipelagos of Ryukyu and the Ibaram Beach, and in Malaysia, many sites of the Sabah states in the Turtle Islands Heritage Protected Area, and many islands of the Semporna region. Lastly, many sites of the Turtle Islands in the Malacca states. In Sri Lanka, the coastal wetlands including the Rekawa Lagoon and the canal system rich in mangroves. Several beaches in the hotspots of Rekawa and Godawaya can also be listed. Thank you very much for your attention.
He doesn't listen us, but thank you, Dimitri. I think it was very, very clear, the presentation. And now I'm glad to open the floor for questions, either to Susan and Brian or to Fenia for the part regarding the regional seas conventions.
Hello, everybody. I'm very happy to be part of this and to have been invited to this session. In fact, I thank you, and I am happy to see also a number of my friends here. I have some comments. I'm sorry I couldn't begin from the beginning, so I may have lost some things. And unfortunately, I have not read already the actual documents about the IMTAs. So I may say a number of things which are not according to these. But I had some small comments with regards to the last presentation. He mentioned the RACSPA, the Barcelona Convention. And I think one of the advantages, one of the main advantages of the Barcelona Convention is that through SPAMI sites, actually they can do sites which are in high seas. It's one of the conventions whereby they can actually do a site which is shared by a number of other jurisdictions as well, like for example Pelagos. So that's an advantage with regards to having a protected area at sea, with regards to being shared by a number of countries. So I think that's quite a good advantage. And from this aspect, I think we have also to look at the upcoming United Nations BBNJ agreement, which will be under the United Nations. It's soon coming, it's in the process probably. There's been some drafts. I am a bit out of touch now, but I used to follow it quite closely. And this is with regards to high seas protection. And there's a particular subgroup with regards to marine protected areas in all the high seas, which represent more than 50% of our ocean. So that's important to look at as well. With regards to Natura 2000, which is the protected area structure with regards to the European Union, I think I have a bit my reservation, because although I agree with the general points made, countries which are member states of the EU are obliged to do a management plan after 6 years. They are obliged to do a management plan for that particular Natura 2000 that they created. And there's a process whereby Natura 2000 can also be created for marine turtles, or for example, because they are Annex 2, and that's what Annex 2 means. And also for Tursiops truncatus, also for the bottlenose dolphin. So Natura 2000 particular for turtles, but also for the others, you know, we have to do a management plan. And although there are no strict measures, there's a particular measure whereby if you can kind of show that there's a particular damage being done to the area for which that species was created, then you can follow up a very rigid enforcement process. So that's one of the strong points as well, I think. I think that basically that's what I had to say. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I will just request you, Carmen, to introduce yourself, because not everybody knows all the participants, so this will be nice. Please.
Okay, sorry. Yes, that's my fault. I'm Carmen Mifsud. I'm from Malta. I used to work on marine biodiversity for something like 18 years. And now lately I have joined the marine enforcement team with regards to my job. But I still follow, obviously, marine turtles issues and all these things. Thank you.
Thanks, Carmen. So I don't know if our presenters want to respond or to comment on any of the issues that Carmen raised. Fenia, maybe, or Brian, you know. I think it was very interesting, your points, because in fact in Dimitri's presentation I missed a little bit, so I understand that you cannot cover everything, so it's not a criticism, but for me next step will be how all these criteria that he identified very clearly apply at the surface level and in the ground, and in terms that could be really applicable either for the designation, either for the management. So most are very good measures, but sometimes the framework in which these measures to protect marine turtles are not, there is not any specific body in charge of taking care in permanence. So that could be the main difference in applying in MPAs or applying outside MPAs, despite that are necessary everywhere. So maybe this could be something that we should promote, so that I understand that designation of IMTAs is also dealing with this in delimiting those important areas that eventually can become MPAs, so under any kind of legislation, depending on the area. And your point about the high seas is also very relevant. So the example of the Mediterranean, the Barcelona Convention, with this Pelagos sanctuary, which is not easy to manage, but is a good example of transboundary cooperation in huge surfaces out of the coast. That is quite different from the majority of our MPAs. So those are really important topics that I invite my colleagues to add your views on that as well.
Yeah, to add about the high seas, it's especially important because, as you mentioned, when you put in place conservation measure in your water, often you're restricted of what you can do depending on who has the authority. And for example, anything to do with fishery, sometimes quite limited. But your fishery of your country may have to respect the measure you put in place. But for example, at the EU level or higher level, it's quite not the same authority that legislate for the measure you might want to put in place. And by having some, for example, the Pelagos MPA, because it's recognized by the Barcelona Conventions, that means that all the signatory parties have to follow whichever measure they would, decide to implement in the MPA. So it's much more powerful in some time, depending, again, it depends on the measure you want to put in place. For example, conservation measure on nests, it's really territorial and applying to the country. But anything you want to do at sea, and especially with bycatch, then yes, like regional convention are key to be able to have all the country to take part to that conservation effort and respect the measure that you may want to put in place. Yes.
And I would like you to highlight, make a precision on the process of the important marine turtle areas as the IMAs, IBAs, etc. It's a scientific process that comes in, to support to decision making. So these areas are not by their own protected areas, of course. They are here to highlight great importance for the species that are considered, marine turtles, etc. And then this is scientific-based information available to decision makers at any level, local, regional, national, or regional for regional seas cooperation, etc. To use this information for marine protected areas, for marine spatial planning, for any other designation of international organizations, etc., etc. This is important to be highlighted and presented as such. It's the same chain, but not the same stage of decision making.
Thanks, Fania. There are more comments or questions?
Yes, can I ask a question?
Please, go.
I'm Alexander Girard. I'm in charge of a network of sea turtle actors in Africa, Atlantic Africa, Central Africa. And the name of the network is Rastoma. And yes, so thank you, Dimitri, for the presentation about the convention and memorandum. But for example, in Africa, Atlantic Africa, the memorandum is only a paper decision. It's something diplomatic, politic, and as you said, there were no funding dedicated to this convention, to this memorandum, and in the field you have only civil society. And the marine protected area in Central Africa, for example, it's the implementation of rules is bad. And there's no money to manage the marine protected area most of the times. So I would suggest to involve the civil society, at least in Africa, in the process for important marine turtle area. And as we said before, I think the risk is to have important marine area where important marine turtle area where you have data, because if you are in a data-rich region, you will have something highlighted, and in the data poor regions, and Africa is a data poor region, we won't see anything on the map. So I would like to make sure the process balance this effect. And what are your proposals, maybe Brian, to make sure we appear on the map?
Thank you, Alexandre. I will give the floor to Brian or Susan to respond on that. And the next, just to prepare Auguste Turcosan, that he's also willing to ask something. So after the response, Ozan, you will have the floor.
Thank you, Buri. Thank you, Alexandre. Good to hear from you and see you, my friend. And thank you for the question. I'll briefly provide a little response. We've been, much of the feedback we've gotten thus far has been great because it has given us some perspectives on how the criteria and the process can be developed, of course, to be flexible, to be applicable globally, but then the importance of involving multiple types of stakeholders at the regional scale. So not just, let's say, academics or government agencies, et cetera, but especially with the introduction of the cultural significance criterion, recognizing that there are other classes of stakeholders that may not fall into those classical kind of biocentric categories, if you will, or those with that kind of expertise, to make sure that that truly diverse perspectives are reflected. And that was, and to connect then back to Fenia's response, which was fantastic, to the previous questions about the purpose of the important marine turtle areas is not necessarily to be a priori marine protected areas, but rather simply to identify areas that are important for marine turtle conservation in many ways that could be defined. And so I put those two things together to say that our goal is certainly that at the regional level, that the processes that gather feedback and evaluate criteria to determine those areas is really diverse, and not just the way that we typically say it, but maybe it isn't actually that way in the room. So all of that said, Alexandre and others who have the same point of view and concerns, please provide that feedback directly into the process now and repeatedly to make sure that the perspectives are reflected.
I'm already participating in your survey, so you have my answer.
I do, in fact. I remember seeing it. Thank you.
And yes, but what I observe, for example, in the ocean governance scheme, we see MedPan, we see ROMPAO, which are MPA networks, but we don't see the civil society networks. And for example, in Atlantic Africa, most of the nesting sites are outside the MPA, and when they are in MPAs, there's nobody's in charge of sea turtle with a good knowledge of sea turtle in the MPA. It's outside the MPA within the civil society. So I think I would suggest to include civil society network, at least for the Africa and West Africa region. I don't know how to do it. And yes. And for Dimitri on the map, so you have the memorandum of Abidjan, but currently you have at least 3 networks in Africa. You have Rastoma in Central Africa, you have WATSCON in West Africa, and you have NASNet in North Africa. And each of them are covering 6 countries, so it makes 18 countries. And I think it's a good basis to implement your data collection for IMTAs.
Thanks a lot, Alexandra. I note the suggestion of the social networks, and in fact, Rostoma has been identified, as I said, the first step in this specific work we are doing in the ocean governance with the twinning network is to identify key actors. And it's you are absolutely right that often what the big problems happens outside of the MPAs. So certainly for the specific topic on marine turtles, it is really, really interesting to collaborate and establish cooperation with other networks, even if they are not composed by we will take into account that as far as possible, we will establish some contact with you to see how we can also support your work, because it's a very nice model of a civil society initiative to protect marine turtles. So I really note your suggestion. And now I give the floor to August.
Very quickly, just to say that Dimitri can be with us today, but I'm here to take notes and forward to him some relevant remarks. Even if he has finished his training, he's in the loop to know what are the feedbacks on his work, and to precise that in the he has identified the different networks, civil society networks that Alexandre Girard was presenting. He didn't make it in this presentation here because we need to conserve a parallel between the different regional sea conventions. But there is a detailed document for the Abidjan Convention where he has been presenting more in detail the whole organization for the region, for the area. But thank you for precising that to all the participants today.
And thank you. And if I can just add, just now Medpan is presenting, this IMTA process on behalf of the MAVA project, and there's many NGO that are representing civil society in that project. So it's not dedicated to MPA, but really to the conservation of marine turtle, trying to involve all the partners around the Mediterranean that have the same key target, which is the protection of marine turtle. And you are really key to that global effort. And I'm sure Brian, will take all this contribution and recommendation into the current work. But thank you, Alexander, for pointing it out. It's really important. Thank you.
Thanks, Susan. Now, Mr. August Turkazan, you have the floor.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I hope you can hear me. This is August from Turkey. I will have two questions. By the way, it's great to see all of you and my sea turtle friends, and greetings from Turkey to all of them. One of my questions is, as you noticed that it's a scientific-based data, we will proceed, but the scientific data needs to be more monitoring efforts. So this important marine areas work, for how long it will be valid? For 5 years or for 10 years? Are you going to repeat it every 5 years or every 10 years? This is my first question. My second question is, in recently the adaptive conservation is, taken into consideration too much. So in this respect, the climate change impact is very important. Is this verified or identified important marine turtle areas will be projected for the future? It could not be an important marine turtle area at the moment, but for 10 years or 20 years, it could be. So this is my two questions. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
So you want to Brian?
Certainly, yeah. Hello, August. It's great to see you. Thank you for participating and thank you for your questions. On your first question about time frame, we haven't established that in a concrete way at this point. From where we're sitting now, the first step is to finalize at least the draft criteria and suggested process for evaluating them and that framework. And then the next step would be to to essentially refine those using in actual regions with actual information and people who know that information. I think the idea would be if especially the important marine mammal area framework and process is any guide, which we are using it, of course, as a guide. It could be a rolling process, to be honest, because we would see the development of the IMTAs happening on regional bases, so region by region, rather than all regions in the year 2022, let's say, and then an update in 5 years or 10 years. However, I mean, your question still is definitely valid about when a region does establish them. When could it be repeated? I personally, we haven't decided that. That hasn't been established. So recommendations are welcome. I would envision that that again could be something that individual regions determine. It could be that that there's a process for suggesting candidate important marine turtle areas, like the IMMA process, and maybe that could happen at any time. And then the regional experts may determine to then formally evaluate those proposals. And maybe it's something like that. But certainly your point about making sure they don't get old and that they are updated appropriately is absolutely valid. And I think there would be some consideration of that as we go forward. On your second question about climate change, really, really good. It hasn't come up just yet, which isn't to say that either it isn't important or we haven't discussed it a bit internally. I'll answer it in the context of how we've been thinking about threats altogether. So going back to Fenia's really good point before that I echoed, we're thinking of once IMTAs are developed for a region, let's say, that it's a tool then for people working in that region at different scales to use for various conservation applications. And it could be that threats are involved in the determination process as kind of a secondary set of criteria to identify different types of important marine turtle areas. Perhaps there are some that are developed specifically as climate refugia, for example. I'm just, not saying that that's necessarily going to happen, but we want it to be flexible so that people who really know what the challenges and the values are at relevant scales have that tool to flexibly develop to try to address what their conservation concerns and priorities are. So I guess on both of your questions, I sort of didn't answer, but I hope you recognize they're such good questions that we don't want to define them necessarily right now and then lock ourselves into something that isn't flexible, but certainly recognizing that we do need to consider them. So yeah, again, thank you, August, and
thank you,
yeah,
Brian,
happy to talk more.
Thank
Okay.
you.
Sure.
Can I just throw something in there? Yeah, what you brought up is really. Can everybody hear me?
Yes, but
introduce yourself, Rod.
Yes, I am Rod Mast from the Marine Turtle Specialist Group. It's good to see August, all you turtle folks. Hi. And I just want to point out that while Brian doesn't have a precise answer to that, any more than we have the same answer for red list assessments or for the refinement of regional management units or revision of our global scale priorities portfolio, we need to, as we're thinking about the long-term strategy for IMTAs, build in the funding to make regular revisions possible. As you know, August, we're looking at regional management units and global priorities portfolio now. This is the first time in 10 years we've been able to afford to do it. It's a big exercise. It takes a lot of money and a lot of manpower. But as we're developing our strategy for how we're going to not just define IMTAs in the short term, but keep them refined as we move into the future, which is going to be absolutely critical, especially given climate change and all the other threats to sea turtles. We need to set aside the money to get that done.
Thanks, Roderick, for this note. I will now give the floor to David, that he's asking for a while.
Thanks so much, Puri, and thank you for the presentations, which were great. I think there's a comment in the chat box about the 10-year periodicity of IMA considerations, but IMAs are also apt to be reviewed by extraordinary workshops as well if more information becomes available. So I think that's good. And Rod makes a great point. It's actually very funding dependent, I think. I also wanted to comment that the cultural criteria make the IMTAs really, I think it's a USP. I think it will really appeal to, particularly to CBD, but to decision makers who are keen to incorporate indigenous knowledge, and I think that's really, really important in the way that the IMTAs have been explained. But my main point was that I think it would be really helpful to link the development of IMTAs to the post-2020 Global Biodiversity Framework as well, which includes key elements on connectivity and threatened species. We just did some work for UNEP, which is now on the CBD website, looking at how the regional seas programs can contribute to that. And I think the presentation that Dimitri gave links in well to that, but if it can somehow be linked in, the IMTAs can be linked into the GBF, that would be great. Thanks a lot.
Thanks, David. So, is there any other question or comment from our participants? If not, I will just suggest that our speakers... Yeah.
Sorry, there is one from Jakub Kaska.
Okay, so this will be the last intervention from the public, and then I will just invite our speakers to do a closing remarks regarding the questions they receive. Please.
We cannot hear you, and it's weird because normally you are unmuted, Jakub.
Please, Jakub?
No, we cannot. I'm afraid
No,
we cannot hear you.
it doesn't work.
If you don't mind writing it down in the chat.
Yeah, maybe.
What about now?
Now, yes.
Yes, I took out the microphone, so I think it's better. I had a couple of problems during the presentations. I lost some of the voices of the speakers as well. But anyway, as being a partner of this MAVA project, working with Susanna and Metpan, and also being an MTSG member of also developing the IMTA criteria, I think one of the good chances of Mediterranean is a relatively small proportion of the sea turtles living in the Mediterranean. I would say 4 or 5% of the loggerheads only living in the Mediterranean. But we have very important areas already recognized by different conventions or natural sites and so on. I think we can develop better IMTA than any other regional units, because we set up already some standard for other categories of the classification of the nesting sites or marine sites. So it would be ideal to start this IMTA process from the Mediterranean. Then we can probably develop a criteria, then this can amplified or applied to the other regions. Obviously, there is no fixed things. There are many questions, reviewing of every 10 years or developing different threats and so on. I think it will be a very good start of Metpan process of bringing this IMTA process and getting also the MTSG support for the preparation of the IMTA criteria. I think would be a very good example for the rest of the regional units. And I just want to mention this in front of everyone so that the Rod and Brian are already supporting in this IMTA process globally, and we are in the Mediterranean holding the local umbrella, let's say, under the MEDPAN. This MAVA funding is enabling all of us to work together. I think we are working on the boat nestings and the satellites and some in-water research as well. So these can be combined and they can be applied for the development of the maybe first IMTA in the Mediterranean. Thank you.
Thank you, Jakub. So thanks for the Mediterranean suggestion to lead a little bit this process. So I'm glad to see my colleagues from the Mediterranean enthusiastic. Do you want to respond, Brian or Rod, on that?
No, thank you, Jakub. Also great to see you, my friend, and thank you for your comment. It is well received for sure. We have been, as Susan and Fenya and Rod and others who've been involved so far can attest, we have definitely considered the Mediterranean as a key region, potentially very early on in the kind of development process. Still to be determined, but certainly we agree with all of your points about why the Med would be a really good region to incorporate early on and to help refine the process and the criteria. So yes, noted, and we will continue to keep it in consideration. Thank you.
Thank you. So I think it's time to close our webinar. So it took a while to start asking questions, but now you are more motivated, it seems. Anyway, we will continue organizing these kinds of exchanges, and I will just give the floor for few more minutes to the speakers in case they want to just wrap up or just summarize or send us a final message before I conclude formally. Do you want, Brian, continue yourself?
Thank you, Puri. Thank you to everyone for your attention and for the great discussion. Clearly, this is something that has been identified as important, to use our word for the day, and in various contexts. We appreciate certainly from the Marine Turtle Specialist Group perspective to see the various ways in which people are already seeing the potential application and importance of the IMTA framework. And we look forward to more discussion. We invite, of course, other comments and feedback that people might have and weren't able to just now. Susan and Fenya and Puri all have our contact information for those of you who don't. And yeah, we invite more feedback and comments. And thanks again for the forum. Thank you to the organizers for inviting us. We appreciate the opportunity to share. Yes, and good luck to all of you in your very important work in your corners of the world. We look forward to collaborating with you in the future.
Thank you, Brian. Susan?
Yeah, I won't add much. I just want to emphasize that it's a work in progress, a very much work in progress. So, like this is, the time to share, provide all the feedback you can, and it will be an ongoing process forever too. So, whichever IMTA on the table next, it will be, as you mentioned, something to do again in the future. So we're all there together now. And thank you all. Thanks for the organizer. Thank you all for your input and enthusiasm.
Thanks, Susan. Fenya?
Thank you. Well, first of all, I would like to thank Dimitri because he has been very, very motivated working on marine turtles. It's really his passion, and it was really interesting to. I love working with passionate people like also all of you, and I think we had a great exchanges today, and the next two sessions also will be very, very interesting. I think it will be different communities, the French community, the Spanish-speaking community, that all these points of view and exchanges will be very, very useful and relevant at that time of the progress of the processes and the initiatives. So I'm sure we will exchange again in the future, and we keep in contact for our next steps and future developments. Thank you, everybody.
Thanks, Fenia, and I thank all of you, those that were speakers and those that you made questions and comments. I think it has been a great debate. As Fenia said, we expect to have more diverse exchanges with other different languages speaking communities. And I just want to remind all of you that the target of this ocean governance project is to support management effectiveness, but by connecting what is the activity on the ground or the managers, but also with the political action. So I just take note of the connections that David mentioned about the post-2020, the new biodiversity framework. And I just to say that we will be glad to support any progress on that. So this is also part of the objectives of our project. So if you have specific suggestions regarding the inclusion of IMTAs or the protection for marine turtles that could be delivered and that we can share in the discussions and around the post-2020, please feel free to contact us and to suggest, because this is part of this large network that we want to contribute to create between people that is concerned for marine protection, for marine turtles, for MPAs, and connecting all of us and being more able to really deliver the best results and do the best practice in terms of managing properly our ocean. So thanks to all of you. You are invited to join us if you want to participate in French or Spanish, and you will have available as well the record of this webinar in the days, and we will send you the link so you can listen again all the nice information. Thanks a lot and have a nice evening, a nice afternoon, nice day, whatever it's applicable to you. Thanks a lot. Bye-bye.